If you fail, are you keen to do it again? And if you fail again, are you keen to get up and do it again? I mean, that's really what it is to be an entrepreneur. You're going to fail at many, many different things, just like you'll fail at anything in your life. But what's really important is it's not necessarily a failure, it's a learning experience. There are different challenges, and always you're learning how to do things better, more efficiently. You're learning what works, what doesn't work, what a particular customer wants versus another customer.
At first glance, probably not very much, but today's guest has spent his career exploring exactly the kinds of seemingly unrelated worlds, right? So, what do sheep farming, sustainability, startups, customer behavior, university research, and entrepreneurship have in common? That is
Uh,
what we are going to explore today. So, hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of School to Startup brought to you by Tracxn, a private market intelligence platform that's been supporting the global university ecosystem for over 12 years. Through our university partnerships, we work with institutions driving innovation and entrepreneurship. And this series highlights academic leaders making this happen. I'm Harish, your host today. Joining us is Dr. Geremy Farr-Wharton. He's a senior lecturer in entrepreneurship and innovation and Director of Research Engagement at Edith Cowan University School of Business and Law. His work sits at a fascinating intersection of research, entrepreneurship, industry, and real world impact, from helping startups move ideas towards the market to working with industries on new commercial opportunities to exploring how universities can turn knowledge into something that actually creates value. And that's what I want to explore today. Um, Dr. Geremy, welcome to School to Startup.
Thanks again for having me.
Great. Let me start with something you have been working on recently, the sheep industry. You're currently involved in a project looking at how Australian sheep industry can diversify its products, markets, and commercial opportunities. What did you see in the sheep industry that made you think there is actually a big innovation opportunity here?
I think I think that's a really, really good question. And there's a little bit to unpack with it. So let's see how we go. But essentially, in Australia, we have recently had the federal government announce a live export ban on sheep outside of Australia, and there's a couple of reasons that led to that ban. But those aside, that has happened quite quickly, and the industry has had to respond. And one of the ways that we've dealt with the large amount of sheep that we've got in Australia, particularly those that are adult and aged beyond, has been to send them offshore as live animals to get revenue from that process. Now that that's no longer the case, we've had to adapt towards traditional markets, like developing out the primary cuts, processing these animals, and delivering them to retail markets. But for the farmers that were able to essentially sell them as live sheep, that's an income source that's no longer available to them. And so the project itself is really, it's less about the sheep industry and really more about exploring new products or new value add commodities that we could extract from either live animals or once they've been processed, in order to supplement aspects of the value chain for different stakeholders, whether it's producers, so farmers, processors, so abattoirs, and exporters and the like, across the as I mentioned, the value chain. And so it's exciting, and the reason we're exploring that, it's a project funded out of the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry. It's really an opportunity for us, not necessarily having that deep exposure to the sheep industry previously, but to bring our expertise with taking products to market, with commercializing sustainable business models, and to explore how businesses can thrive through innovation. Bringing those capabilities to the sheep industry to explore new approaches to particular markets that they may not have even explored previously. I mean, one of the aspects of that project is actually looking internationally to what may have been tried internationally where we haven't necessarily explored that in the Australian ecosystem, and taking some of those learned approaches and embedding them into business as usual. And when we're partway through that project at the moment, so it's actually quite exciting what we've unpacked so far. And you know, it's at the very forefront of innovation where you get to explore, you know, aspects that you would never have had the time to look at previously. So it's an interesting project for us. And so it's less about the sheep industry itself and more about how innovation can really support new ways of thinking.
Very interesting. Well, we normally associate entrepreneurship with startups, technology, and new companies. But can an established industry that's been around for generations actually be more interesting from an innovation perspective than a brand new startup?
I mean, look, every business on the planet, if it's going to survive, it has to innovate and innovate constantly. We often think about smaller organizations being a lot more agile and able to do innovation at smaller piloting scales where they can then grow and scale beyond that. With large organizations, they are slower. There's a lot more people, there's a lot more complexity. And so their ability to innovate quickly is always a limiting factor between how much money they can throw at particular things. And it's interesting I say that, how much money they or resourcing they can throw at a particular problem that they're looking to innovate around. There's the productivity paradox that I am always teaching to my students. The more resources you have doesn't necessarily equal a linear improvement in innovation. In fact, it's quite the opposite. The more resources you have, the less innovation you tend to see for the same return on investment. I think there is a tremendous opportunity for large organizations to really identify those deep technical challenges that they are continuously confronted with, whether it's different aspects of the supply chain, whether it's looking after personnel, whether it's improving the amount of waste that they're producing or looking at reducing it. Any ways in which they can reduce the costs of supplying their goods and services, I think, is a noble and worthy opportunity to explore for them. And I think that is at the paramount of why they innovate and how they go about it. So where they tend to find challenges and challenges that they may experience themselves rather than across their industry, it's important that they explore ways of overcoming those challenges. And that happens whether you're a large organization or whether you're a tiny startup. I think the other really key difference, when you've got small family-owned businesses or traditional business models or even startups, you tend to have a very entrepreneurial mindset and approach towards problem solving, and that isn't translated into large organizations. There are a few in organizations, probably up to about 5% of the personnel within large organizations, that are entrepreneurially minded and explore problems by gathering resources or being industrious in how they approach some of those challenges. But the majority of people are there performing a task or delivering whatever it is in their role description. There are fewer stepping outside of the bounds of their roles to really solve some of those challenges in different ways. And they're often, quite collaborative in that approach and the like. But it's important we have the mix of all of the personality traits when we're looking at organizations, particularly large organizations.
Interesting. And your own journey is kind of very interesting because you have worked across academia, industry, research, startups,
Mm.
and entrepreneurship. When did entrepreneurship and innovation became something, or become something you became genuinely interested in, rather than simply something you were researching?
I think I think that is a very, very good question. I actually owe it to one of my old supervisors, and what I would probably recall rather than a supervisor, even though he was, as a mentor. But maybe I'll give it a little bit of a context about it. So I've always loved inventing and innovating. Um, whether it's just exploring new ways of doing things or seeing how we could do something and there's no existing solution for it. So I've always had that curiosity. In 2010, I went back and did my PhD at Queensland University of Technology in Australia, and really that was because I was sick of being in industry at the time. I was working in public service, and the 9 to 5, it just felt so insignificant for me, and so I wanted to go back and improve my capabilities around a doctoral philosophy. Um, in that, I developed a number of, I mean, it was when apps were new, right? We had the iPhone, maybe we were up to iteration 4 or 5 at that point, and apps were still a thing. It's that we're still building apps and seeing opportunities. So at the time, I mean, my PhD topic looked at reducing food waste in domestic settings, and so I had developed a number of mobile applications at that point where it was really about how do you, in your home, stop throwing out really good food, or at least buying good food and letting it go to waste. How do we actually utilize more of that? And at the end of my PhD, I was actually called up by a number of news agencies wanting to interview me and saying, they kept asking me questions. So is this available to everyone right now? And I said, no, they're all research prototypes. I don't know how to commercialize or take them to market. And they said, oh, but these are great. And I was interviewed by New York Times and others at that point in time, and I'm like, well, why aren't I taking this to market? Is there opportunities to do it? How do I even start that process? And the university at the time, unless the university owns intellectual property, which they don't tend to for students, including PhD students, they don't necessarily support the commercialization journey of, intellectual property that's developed, and that included a number of my apps. And so I didn't really know what to do next. And it just so happened I was given a lecturer position at that point. And I had the supervisor that I previously talked about. And a lot of people would know him, at least by name, or at least the startup that he had at that point in time. So his name, Alex Stryling, he, for those that don't know him, if you have a Windows machine right now and you opened up your start menu and you looked at Clipchamp, Clipchamp is the business that he ran. And at the time when he was my supervisor at Queensland University of Technology, when I was a lecturer, he often prompted me around aspects of, well, if you want to go out into industry, this is what you should be looking at doing with your PhD. And it's very much looking at things from a commercial perspective and the value that that has on individuals or businesses or whoever the market is. Versus if you want to do academe, you've got to go do paper writing and all of the fun stuff that we do in academe. And at that point in time, I was at a junction, really trying to understand, well, do I go down an academic path or do I explore the opportunities to commercialize some of the stuff I had built during my PhD and other things that had popped up? And I thought, well, I had spent, 3.5 years doing a PhD. Maybe I should really just try the academic gig and give it a go. And knowing full well that I was really interested in innovating and inventing things. But I thought, okay, I'll give it a go. And so I did a postdoc, number of postdocs actually, internationally as well as locally. And I came back to Australia after living overseas for a number of years, and then CSIRO, Australia's national research organisation, asked me to join one of their teams, and I thought, wow, that's an opportunity that I can't miss. I had worked with CSIRO previously, and I would rejoin them as a social scientist working across the organisation on a bunch of different problems, small, big, everything from building what our future cities should look like, through to knee replacements and the best approaches to unilateral or bilateral knee replacements, as well as exploring other things that I had never been exposed to before, like how do we build AI chatbots, through to understanding our gut microbiome and ensuring we've got the best guts that we've got available to us to improve immunity and health and wellness. And at my experiences there, I thought, if I'm at CSIRO, I'm going to have the best opportunity to learn how to commercialize intellectual property or some of the research outputs that we develop. I mean, after all, like if you ask most PhD people that go through a PhD journey, and I do this on a regular basis, I ask them this very question, like, why is it that you've decided to go do your PhD, or why have you come to a research ecosystem? And they always respond, maybe 80%, because I've had some different responses relatively recently. They always respond with something along the lines of, well, I'm here to change the world in some small or big way. And it was no different for me. I came back to academe to really have that opportunity to shape the world in some hopefully large way, but at the moment probably pretty small ways. And while I was at CSIRO, I had the opportunity to go through their innovation program. So for anyone that doesn't already know them, they're called the CSIRO On Innovation Programs, and it's almost like a boot camp with an incubator and an accelerator and essentially a pipeline of activity to help build your capability, test out your business ideas, and take those to market. And so we put through an AI chatbot at the time through those programs, and what we realized was there's a great opportunity to take it to market, and no one in the team had two key capabilities to do it. One of those was business development, so how to go sell the thing. And the second thing was really understanding how to commercialize the IP into an entity, understand how to take that to market and whatnot. And so I thought at the end of my time at CSIRO, I've got to take a role that's really going to give me that exposure. And so I very thankfully to two great people back at Queensland University of Technology, I went and asked them, hey, is there any opportunity to join the Office of Industry Engagement to learn how to do commercialization and industry engagement for research intellectual property? And they were amazing to me. Mark and Erin, they gave me the opportunity to really learn how to do that. And so I spent the next 2 years doing that for data science and health intellectual property, and really learning actually how all the different ways that you can commercialize research outputs, and also how to actually drive investment towards developing out those so that you can take it to market successfully and with a business model that makes sense. And so by the end of my time there, I wanted to get closer to the startup ecosystem. I had tried businesses previously, but for the reasons I've already mentioned, they just weren't that successful. They didn't go much further off the ground than where we originally got to. And so I thought, well, let's find an opportunity to bring me close to the startup ecosystem without jumping back into a startup. And I ended up moving to Curtin University on the west coast of Australia. And it was a good opportunity, and I ran their entrepreneurship programs for a time where I could see, tremendous opportunities to really build out capability of those looking to start startups, innovation-driven startups, but also to help particular communities. And so that led me to explore coming to Edith Cowan University to see how we might actually support traditional style businesses, as well as mum and dad businesses, and to explore how we might really make innovation become alive. And my key motivation really has always been about how you diversify economies, particularly in Western Australia. For those that don't know, I mean, mining underpins the entire economy. It's the single largest industry across the economy. And if we're looking at, transitions away from net carbon zero and other things like what happens when we've got less reserves in the ground, or we're not needing commodities anymore. If mining's your backbone, you've got to explore alternatives, and startups are an amazing way of exploring how innovation can really transform economies. But beyond that, small businesses are often ignored when you're looking at capability support, and this is every ecosystem over the world. And it's because they tend to be quiet, and they tend to, just keep the cogs moving. And realistically, there's not a lot that needs to happen to help them make just a small increment, whether it's in developing out a new innovation, or embedding existing technologies to enable them to move, to grow, or to scale, either across product suites, service suites, or internationally, or into different markets. And you do that, and all of a sudden it creates a systemic change across economies. And if I can go back to just a really quick item, like if you help small businesses to grow, they are the backbone of every economy. They represent, if you take Australia, they are about 95%, maybe it's probably even a higher percentage of the entire business community across Australia. So you support even a small portion of those to grow, and you create serious change across economies. And that's how impactful it is. And there's just not that much support there. So, I mean, I've always had this interest, and I have a business of my own currently where I commercialize a particular IP. I won't talk about it in detail, but a particular IP in the mining tech industry, which ideally was designed, and I certainly designed it in this way, to save lives. I mean, that's why we want to have an impact in some form or another. And I'm always keen to support others who want to take a similar journey to innovate or invent anything, and take that, whatever that idea is, to market. And over time, I've learned capability plays a role, mentoring plays a role, and grit or motivation, someone's own motivation to go make a change. It's always interesting. Across the learning and teaching platforms that I have, and I teach into a number of entrepreneurship degrees, as my role as an academic. It's amazing getting to talk to students, young or old, looking to how they actually take their idea to market. And, most of them started where I started 10, 15 years ago at the start of my PhD, just wanting to invent and innovate. They've got these amazing ideas, and they just don't necessarily know how to shape a business model around it, or even who it might be for. They've always got ideas, and they've always untested or validated. And so being able to give them the skill sets in order to actually go do that, it's a tremendous pleasure.
Amazing. And you have also worked with university startups and accelerator programs, as you told that you were part of Curtin Accelerate. So when a student or a researcher walks into an accelerator with a really exciting idea, what are you looking for first?
It's a good question. And there's probably a couple of different perspectives that you end up playing. I mean, so I'll take the because Curtin Accelerate was an interesting one, and you're looking for ideas that have matured a little bit more. But it's actually the team that you're also wanting to look at. Are they in a team that's committed? Are they wanting to explore? Are they looking to leverage funding in whatever way in order to get their product to market? And does the product that they've got, and particularly their ideas of the market, make sense? And obviously I'm talking about market, and a lot of people call market customer in this context. But a new program that I've just launched a couple of weeks ago, called the ECU Creative Entrepreneurs Bootcamp, which was a 3-day intensive as opposed to an incubator or an accelerator, which is a longer time horizon, with more resources and more focus on particular aspects. That Creative Entrepreneurs Bootcamp was really about how you test an idea and how you funnel it through an incremental, scaffolded approach to really test it with different markets, and then build out the right offering with a sustainable business model that's going to work. And the key thing for me, because all of these programs have eligibility criteria, and I have fought to drop those eligibility criteria except for one key thing, and that is how motivated you are to actually take a product to market. And the reason I say I've fought to remove the eligibility criteria, often people that front those programs, they've got an idea that they've just come up with, and they've never explored entrepreneurship before. Entrepreneurship is one of those, like, it's a term that's thrown out so much these days that has so many different meanings for different people. And from my perspective, entrepreneurial thinking is, as I kind of alluded to earlier, the approach to how you solve problems and the different frameworks that you can employ in order to solve those problems. And ideally get some money for it at the end of the day. And ideally that's in the form of a business. A lot of eligibility focuses on, is this your first time? Is this, are you an alumni or associated with that organization? And I think all of that needs to drop. And I think it's really about, are you motivated to do this? And if you fail, are you keen to do it again? And if you fail again, are you keen to get up and do it again? I mean, that's really what it is to be an entrepreneur. You're going to fail at many, many different things, just like you'll fail at anything in your life. But what's really important is it's not necessarily a failure. It's a learning experience where, I've had a number of businesses over the years. My most recent business, and having taught entrepreneurship for a number of years, my most recent business, I have learned so much that I didn't capture in any of those experiences previously. And every time I set up a new business, it is the case. You learn more, you realize what works, what doesn't work, depending on the co-founders you go in, or if you're a solo founder. There are different challenges, and always you're learning how to do things better, more efficiently. You're learning what works, what doesn't work, what a particular customer wants versus another customer. And all of these build into your approach towards developing businesses. And so I often think, in the most recent Creative Entrepreneurs Bootcamp, I had participants in that who I would call pioneers, who had been running businesses for 30 years. And they realized their business models were always peak, trough, peak, trough, peak, trough. That is, 1 week would be great, then 3 weeks it would be terrible, then 6 months it'd be great, and then all of a sudden 12 months would be terrible. And they just wanted a little bit more security around it, or at least employ frameworks that are known to work. And it was amazing being able to step through the program with them to see how some core concepts that are embedded in design thinking, and we use it across all of our initiatives. They're in almost every book that you will read on entrepreneurship, the same methodologies. And you step them through some of those frameworks, and they have these moments that their eyes just light up and go, how did I never think about that? And yet it's something at the very forefront of what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. And putting it into a structure that made them really identify and explore opportunities to help them grow, to help them look at it from this perspective. You know, a few of them, I should say all of them, but certainly a few of them finished the program where they were like, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to go do that, this just needs to be done, and this is going to work. I've got this, you know, one of them, for example, has a physical located shop that people walk into, and they've never really understood who their customer was. And even going back to the drawing board about, well, not everyone should be your customer, not unless you've got a really good solution that's going to work for everyone. And of course, that probably means that you're going to have a lot of really good solutions that each target little markets. And having them think, oh, okay, well, who is that customer? Okay, is it? And you know, they identified exactly who it was, which was great to see. And then they went further, and it's like, well, what else might they want in the store? And how could you flesh out? You know, I've got this physical location that's just got, you know, all of my creative goods that are stored across the store. What else could I do to provide an experience that that specific market wants? Should I embed music? Should I, you know, et cetera, to improve that experience? But also, are there ways that I can add value to that particular customer? There's specific things that they're looking for when they're looking for my product in particular. How can I go about, you know, I was going to say extracting more value, but adding more value to that customer so that they're, you know, they're getting the absolute best experience they can, and they're getting all of the items that they're wanting. And the business becomes more sustainable because they're getting more revenue in, there's more margins explored on particular goods, et cetera, et cetera. More than that, towards the end of the program, you know, that particular participant, but also others, were exploring partnerships that they should be having with others, because they realized the market that they're explicitly exploring, they go to all of these other locations, which their business isn't, because it's a physical location. So they were exploring how they can essentially leverage and collaborate with other partners, or leverage partnerships to be able to offer their product in multiple different places, and how that would look. I mean, you're talking about that's essentially growing the business to a new level. Rather than looking at scaling it to different locations, you're essentially growing it to a new level. And to have the opportunity to do that in just a 3-day boot camp, I mean, realistically, what these programs, all they really do is facilitate capability development. So new learning, new skills, new frameworks in order to implement in your either business that you're interested in, or your existing business, to grow it in some form or fashion, or establish the business, or to look to scale it. And one of the failings of those programs is, because they're only content, it's very difficult. And you know, we often overload participants as they go through with all of this content, and some of that content is only going to be relevant at particular times in a business journey. They're really good for helping you establish and to give you peeks into how you grow, but it comes down to the motivation of the participant when they're coming through those doors, and whether they're going to stick to it, whether they're going to be able to pivot. You know, the business is inherently hard. A lot of people think that, you know, I'm in this role day and day, I'm hired by this company to do this function. If I went and did it myself, I would be able to, you know, earn bazillions. And therefore I should go do it. And that is not the right mindset, because the truth is, business is really, really hard. I mean, there's the brand reputation that's probably led to those, at least your role working with a bunch of different parties. You know, on top of that, there's also the years of trusted engagement. There's a whole plethora of other aspects that people don't necessarily take into consideration. And realistically, I think, there's in addition, there's opportunities to engage with investors, or perhaps even non-dilutive funding that's available through accelerators, incubators, boot camps, and other programs, which are great, and they're great at helping businesses get in. I think there's another failing that I see, and particular ecosystems that are isolated from other places. You see specific businesses leapfrogging from one program to another, and that's not a good scenario. You want them to get out, like you want them to have learned everything that they need to learn when they finish the program, and then be able to either during the program establish and grow the business in the ways that they're wanting, or at the end of it be able to go do that. And I often hear, particularly in Australia, which is a very different market from the US, that people are just headhunting for investors to, that funding, rather than putting their own dollars in the mix, or even exploring, one of the really interesting things that a lot of people have, a lot of, let's say, entrepreneurs, when they're starting up, they're like, I need a lot of money to go do this very big idea that I've got. And really, one of the first things that we do in my programs, for example, is just unpacking that and tearing it to shreds, so that we actually, and that's probably a bit harsh to say it like that, but it's really looking at, well, what is it that the market wants? What are they willing to pay for? And how does your solution to whatever that problem is that the market is experiencing actually solve that problem? And is it in a way that they're willing to pay for, et cetera, et cetera? And so you're rebuilding whatever that idea is for the end product or service, whatever it turns out to be, in a way that that there is specifically a market there for it. And, again, like there's so many people that just, so many entrepreneurs that think going and getting investments just it, and really they could curtail exactly what their offering is, whether it's a product or a service, right back to exactly what their customer is wanting. There's no better money than that direct from your customer. And I think, that also comes back to one of the other key things I said earlier. A lot of people are going after that money to build that grand vision of their idea, whatever it is, of their offering. The more money they have does not necessarily equal the better outcome, the higher productivity. That productivity paradox is real, and it almost demotivates people to get into gear and make it happen as soon as possible. Anyway.
I think you answered my next question. But let's bring this back to students. If you look at today's students, many of whom will probably have careers that don't even exist yet, right? So, what skills should universities be developing that aren't necessarily captured by the traditional degree?
I think universities are trying to grapple with this very question right now. It's super interesting, right? Looking at this from an entrepreneurial lens, how we approach things in entrepreneurship is you go understand the customer, what challenges they're experiencing, and then develop solutions for a problem that that they're willing to pay for, and you validate it, etc. Universities tend to go to market research in different ways when they're producing new degrees and trying to understand the different topics or themes that need to be embedded across those degrees. And I think we need to see a radical shift in how that happens. I mean, at the end of the day, universities aren't trying to teach you specific disciplinary, as in discipline specific content. They are, if it's marketing, if it's engineering, if it's, there's accreditation bodies where we have to make sure that there is a minimum standard that we're ensuring graduates finish with in terms of content and whatnot. But as you said, I mean, we don't know what careers might be available because of technology enabled opportunities that will come in the future. And we're not just talking about AI. I mean, AI is big right now, and particular types of AI are enabling the opportunity to do things that we've never been able to do, or that took a significant amount of resources or capability to do previously. You can go use Gen AI, for example, to build you serious enterprise software that you would have had to have hired 10 serious software engineers to do previously on very large budgets, so that you're getting the best of the breed, so to speak. You don't have to do that anymore. So we're going to see more technologies fronting markets that enable them to do things in ways that we haven't even been able to contemplate yet. I mean, take quantum computing. If you don't need to worry about memory anymore, if you don't even need to worry about processing speeds, you're able to do things that we never even dreamed of. Plug that in with AI or robotics, and well beyond that. We're not actually, I mean, they call it a singularity for a reason. We don't know what's on the other side of that event horizon at the moment. So how do you prepare students? While discipline-specific content is there as required by our accrediting bodies and the like, realistically, universities are there to teach you how to solve problems, how to approach and understand problems, be curious about problems, and how, leveraging different frameworks, theories, practices, processes, you can conquer some of the very challenges that are at the heart of our existence, right? Let alone business challenges that, have been there for years and years, require deep understanding around, or deep experience in solving some of them. Universities are there to help us also communicate, and communicate effectively to quite a wide variety of different audiences. But to approach those problems in a way that is curious, inquisitive, ethical, and integral to our very existence. I think if you look at universities across time, that hasn't changed, and that won't change into the future. The technologies, of course, will. The innovations that enable us to teach effectively, to help learn, to help explore our curiosities in deeper ways than we ever had before, that they will continue to change well beyond what we have available to us at the moment, with the next big one being quantum computing. But the underpinning of those values of exploration, curiosity, problem solving, communication, they're going to be at the forefront of everything that we do. And I think, there is a tremendous opportunity, but I implore every student that comes through my doors or fronts my desk, absolutely, if there's opportunities if you've got the time to do it, and there's opportunities to engage in other activities beyond just what's associated with your degree or your units, go do them. They will help you meet people. They will help you explore parts of yourself you didn't even realize were there. And I wish I did more of that in all of my degrees to date. And the earlier, the better, because as you get older, there's less flexibility to do that, and you've got more accountabilities, responsibilities. You have kids, bills to pay, etc. In the early years, there's certainly more that you can do of that, and I implore students, go explore it as much as you can.
Amazing. This was an incredible conversation, from sheep farming to startups, research to real world impacts. Today's conversation was really about one thing: how do we turn good idea into something that creates genuine value? Geremy, thank you so much for being part of School to Startup, and thank you for sharing your insights.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Great. And for everyone who are watching, if you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next episode. See you soon.